So welcome to Pulse Online, our video series where we'll be discussing a range of different topics with brands, clients and some members of the Vivant team. And in today's session, we're going to be discussing profitability. So I'm Tom Hancock and I'm the head of paid media at Vivant. And we have Dan and Anthony here.
Hello, I'm Dan. I'm the head of digital performance at Paul Smith. So we are a UK-based fashion brand, mainly in the menswear clothing section. However, we sell a wide array of products across all different categories. Within my role, I sort of manage the paid media side, as well as working quite closely on the data and reporting and analytics.
Cool, and I'm Anthony, and I look after all things e-commerce at Women's Best. Women's Best, a sportswear and sports nutrition brand for women. So we do all things from protein to leggings, and I look after everything. So paid social, data, CRM, online trading and merchandising.
So there's been a number of changes across the industry in the last few years. So we've seen rising ad costs and a number of privacy regulations coming in. How would you say that you've had to adapt your approach to measurement across your performance marketing campaigns? And can you give some key ways that you've done this? So I'll start with Anthony.
Yeah, I think for us actually initially we had to, first of all, really understand what is the impact of those changes. So how actually it changes the data and where are we losing out, and are there any ways or better ways that we can do things? And then I think after that is just taking actually a step back and really think again, start with the business initially, and actually what are we trying to achieve as a business, and how can we understand better the impact of every single, say, channel, and how they can help us to drive the results of the business. So I'm sure we'll touch upon that later on as well, but just making sure that we understand again, the profitability of the business from a top level perspective, and afterwards just start playing with the channels as a second, third step, rather than directly diving into the channels and say trying to maximize the ROAS on Meta, but actually behind that we're still losing cash, for example. So for us, that has really been honing on the numbers from a top level perspective.
And would you say you've been on a journey with the business in that shift away, I suppose the last few years in particular, that move away from ROAS and reporting on last click and in-platform metrics when measuring success? Have you been on the journey with the business and through time?
To be honest, I think that's a journey we're still on at the minute, if I'm honest, because really we haven't started with paid properly for a long time. We only started working with you guys since June last year, which is when we really started properly investing in the channels. And I think we had to adapt quickly. That's the one thing. And I think that's been a fairly recent change to try and move from, for example, a set budget to actually a scalable number that is a top level return on investment number that we can then scale. And that actually then, the beauty of it per se is that it actually brings the other channels into the mix as well, the other parts of the business. Because if we say, well, we need to be more profitable as a business because of our investments in paid, and we see actually the results of those channels. But when times get tough, do we need to pull back on paid, or do we need to actually put a bit more pressure on the other channels to try and deliver first before we just say, well, ring the alarm bell, and we're time to pull back the spend, and we're well, we just make the performance even worse.
Yeah, that's it. It's the alignment of different departments, isn't it? It's sort of you're buying a merch team where we're looking at cost of a product increasing over the time, and then going back into how we can push that product and put pay behind it at the detriment of a little bit of margin, but increasing the sales velocity in a way. And that's something that the sort of cost of the overall comes into play, really. I think obviously ad cost, I know we'll touch on that a bit later, but that sort of comes into play as well, whether your CPCs increase, how that looks per market. From a global perspective, we sort of know the US and is quite a volatile market at the minute, and the cost there anyway is quite high. So it's how you manage the scalability from a budget perspective throughout those different markets overall. I think that's...
Yeah, and actually that adds a lot more pressure on the teams to be agile by itself and say, actually, look at the different countries again. If you're lucky enough to operate in different markets, how can you actually manage this and look at, rather than dive straight into the details, look again at the top level view. Where do you see that better margin? Where is that product selling better? What if you were to reallocate stock in certain places and maybe increase the overall like rate of sale of that product?
Yeah.
But actually just try and, I guess again, like trying to achieve the results rather than actually always try and maximize those like bottom level KPIs, but actually in the end you're actually not helping the business to actually achieve what they want to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe if we can just stick on the points around markets, I think that's really, really important when it comes to like understanding your scalability. So what measurement practices have you put in place, and what new metrics are you using to enable you to like grow into new markets and to sort of look at how you can achieve growth in the long run rather than look too short term and looking at those like you say lower level metrics within the last click model?
Yeah, I think we've almost evolved from, like we mentioned, evolving from that last click model, looking at your overall site ROAS from your ad spend split by your market. We've sort of been working on something at the minute where we're looking at a customer acquisition cost model and applying a max CAC to each market overall. And that's been really interesting to see the scalability. It's almost looking at your net new customer cost and looking at your spend within those markets and seeing how much velocity you've got left to improve. So, for example, at the minute, we're probably doing around £72 is our max CAC for the UK.
Yeah.
And we'll be trading at around 34 quid. So we know we've got a bit of room to budge there on spend. And applying that to each market then gives us the oversight, the sort of, how would you like to call it, the sort of look over of all of those markets overall. And almost showing us, for example, the French market, we know we can push a lot harder because it's a lot lower cost.
It's like your framework for success and like being able to break down those markets into like your allowable CAC for each market, given that you know that the AOV is going to differ. For example, in the US.
But actually, to add to that, again, the beauty of this is to say your allowable CAC is driven by local P&Ls in the end of like what does shipping look like in that country, and you could say, if we want more, let me say, we're now achieving that CAC target for, like, let's say France again, but is there a better courier that we can use, maybe cheaper rates or, faster delivery to increase that CRV? And then that allows, again, to just say, are we maximizing every single element before we actually potentially start looking at pulling back from the paid side, or at least that gives maybe the paid side more of a leg to stand on to push back against the business. Because I feel like maybe a few years ago, at least, nowadays maybe less, but in a few business it's always, or if cash is short, you go and cut it where actually it's easy to spend and easy to pull back, but actually not thinking of the issue you're going to create more gaps. You just like, then when you start spending again, is the platform optimized to the best it can, and so on. To echo that, actually, like being able to look at every single market and almost treat it as its own business helps massively to then drive the performance.
So I know at the beginning we kind of touched on rising costs across the industry. So obviously we've seen huge rises in CPM, CPCs across all the platforms, and it means that the proportion of paid spend versus your marketing budget is really growing. Are you finding that there's like greater scrutiny and more stakeholders within the business who are trying to influence things, and how are you going about navigating that to sort of feed them the information that they need and guide them in the right direction?
I think it's more of the education. It's bringing them on that journey with you and aligning all departments together. We've spoke about this previously in terms of speaking with the finance team, having the finance director fully involved in all the process, so he knows where we're going to invest and how we're going to invest it. And it's gaining that confidence from them. It's gaining the trust and credibility that by scaling this platform in Meta through this ad set, focusing on this product group in particular, will grow profit within jeans, for example, which is something we've seen recently. Our denim collection, we've put a lot of emphasis on that, and we've seen sales, I think it increased by 37.5% versus the previous year. And yeah, we've definitely been honing in on that. I think it's not the scrutiny. I think it's just the education. It's more the alignment with other departments, I'd say.
Yeah, I think it's actually like the increase of trust in the departments, and actually that showing them that you also understand what they care about. Because if you show people you care about the same things as they do, initially at the end of the day, it's all about, like, let's say, making money realistically for the business. But through different KPIs, different metrics, different platforms, different tools, and being able to show that to these guys probably reinforces the trust, and maybe then after it becomes more of a like favor type of relationship with these guys. They're like, oh, can you help us out with this, because we're having a bit of an issue here, or we're having a bit of overstock or something like this. And then you're like, okay, like I'll slash a little bit my CAC just for you, or
That's
something like this.
That is it, though.
And then it's building out these little team synergies, which is really important. I think for us it's different because we're also a small business, so you have a lot more people or less people with more responsibilities in general. So it's allowing the freedom in general to the people to do what they do and be able to drive the business and what they actually should be looking after. Is a key part. But yeah, in general, I think also this rise of costs and everything is a big emphasis for businesses to look at where is their money to make for free, per se. And I think a big thing, for example, is what potentially has been looked down on in the past, like brand or SEO or these things like this organic side of things will probably be a huge focus for many of us, if it's not already, for the next few years, because the best way in a way to increase your profitability without diminishing your spend is probably to increase how much money you make for free to then make that ratio look better. And push
but that
people
in
to think
turn
long
almost
term.
comes from, let's say we currently see quite a lot of good revenue coming directly to the site, and in turn it's that meta spend that you're pushing through from an upper funnel perspective, and you're seeing the returns coming back into certain categories that you are pushing that spend into. It is almost you're paying for the brand awareness, the upper funnel, and the free will come back around eventually in that terms.
But that's almost
trust,
where,
isn't it?
is there again in the future a place where we wouldn't talk about brand marketing and performance marketing, but we'd talk about just the brand spend and the performance spend, and the brand spend is across your meta paid, but it's also across your influencers, your social, and things like this.
Amazing. So back to that point around finance teams, because we as an agency, I think we find it really helpful when we can get in front of a finance team, or we have a certain line of communication with them to enable us to really enable them to understand why the financial planning that we're doing and the planning of media over a longer period is going to actually return spend in the long run. So what metrics are you using when you do talk to your teams internally to educate them around what the long-term value of paid is? Are you using customer lifetime value? Are you sort of pulling in return rates when it comes to specific types of users?
I think initially it's to show the cohorts. Again, it also depends on what the situation of the business is. If we talk about where we have been on a journey, for example, for us was really trying to drive back the new customer acquisition, where the business was feeding off, let's say, the post-COVID era, where acquisition was almost so easy that you had new customers on tap in a way, but now we're very far from this. So for us, it's been really trying to show, if we want to allow the business to grow, we need to feed those cohorts, because we see those cohorts, how the performance of the cohorts over time actually barely changes, and it takes a lot of effort to change how cohorts behave. So it's about how do we scale first the amount of people who fall into those cohorts, and at the same time, as almost like a parallel workflow, is how do we make sure that more and more people come back, but almost by default you will lose people on the journey, and it's to make sure that you always override the amount of new people that come in versus the one that fall through. And through that is just the education of how much it actually really costs for us to acquire those new customers, and potentially diving deeper into maybe what helps us to drive those guys, and really start again playing with the brands, the performance spend. Like for us, brand would be also influencers. So how do these guys help us like longer term? What do we see any variations in those numbers when they spend a little bit more, a little bit less, and so on?
Amazing.
Yeah, I think sometimes in terms of those metrics that for finance in particular, me myself work really closely with the finance team. There's that process in terms of all those vanity metrics that you have almost that, but finance want to know. We start with the top end, sort of just general ROAS. But what we do at Paul Smith is we apply margin ROAS to that. So I think people call it POAS, people can call it ROAS or whatever. I mean, in terms of what we sort of just call it margin ROI internally, which almost goes off of your total return on ad spend, then taking your margin off for the month or for the week, and report back on that overall. We have incorporated cost of sale in quite a lot since November, so that's the rate of sale over gross sales on the day. Nice. Cost over your gross sales on the day, and that's been really good for us. Our account manager Vivon explained it as a guardrails approach, which finance absolutely love because it's all about, oh, don't worry, I'm not going to overspend because we've got these limits in here. So it gives you such a good way of managing spend, but also knowing when you're hitting the limit or when demand is diminishing completely. So you know that, I might need to extend my cost of sale because we're not even scratching we're hitting that limit and we're not making enough on that day. So we need to go from a 6 to a 9, let's say. And that's been a great way for us to be able to scale, but more on a day-to-day, weekly trading basis, where we'll look on it, report back, what's the margin ROI, where we're at, what was the cost of sale for that week, how much room have we got to give, and then back to the other point in terms of what products need to be pushed, and all of that. So that's the good bit to have dialogue with finance, but definitely margin ROI is the key for them.
But then that's also where it becomes a bit tricky, because then you still have to have those discussions with your whoever is in charge of the promotion, or like what happens on your website, because all of a sudden if you start pushing, you'll be like great CAC on outlet, and then your margin ROAS is like going down the cliff, and you're like, oh,
that's it. And
what's going on? So
and that's how you manage it throughout the promotions as well, because within a promotion, your margin ROI is going to take a little bit here, but your overall sales velocity is increased. So
exactly,
I think managing that expectation, and again back to the other point in terms of you're in the middle and you're corresponding with all the different teams to make sure we're all aligned.
But in a way, it's so good, because then you can really adapt to any goal the business has with all these metrics, because you say, well, the business at this point needs more cash flow, so margin will be potentially taking a step back. So you've got rooms, you got those metrics that can help you drive the sales. But then when you say, well, we actually are a little bit tight on margins, will you have those metrics that can help you understand where to pull back as well?
That's where that cost of sale came in. That just really helped us, like them guardrails, that really helped us, because it gave confidence to finance, it gave confidence to us that we know we're not going to overstep the mark. It gave confidence with all the other teams that when we're looking at a day-to-day sale ratio, we're not going above and beyond, and we're looking at it at the end of the week thinking, what have we done? So that cost of sale has been the key, and I think that's one metric that we're definitely going to carry forward, and finance are on board with.
Nice, that's great. So coming to Anthony now. So I know we've just talked around margin, and I know obviously at Women's Best you've got two fairly different verticals within the business, nutrition and apparel. How do you go about navigating that side of things from your reporting standpoint? Like how are you moving through that?
Yes, it's a good question. I think it's actually a big challenge for us, really, because it's finding the happy medium that you don't overdo one and forget about the other. But I guess it'll be a similar story if you have like shoes, jeans, and stuff like this, I guess. But for us, initially, it's been really to go back to the basics per se, and then set targets per category, and really almost look at the category as its own entity, and how we're going to drive that over time. I think this year so far we've been quite successful with the sportswear, and we've introduced quite a lot of different things, which have helped us massively. But I think then we can't just copy paste into like the nutrition side, which in a way we're selling a commodity, and if we are not pushing those USPs to customers, trying to build up that brand awareness and get people on the journey, in the end, it's like we really need to focus on the bottom of the funnel and really like hammer down on, again, price sensitivity, acquiring the right customers, and so on. So I think, to be really honest, I think at the minute for us it's a bit of a we're on a learning curve of how to manage the two together, and not really applying the two together, like really treating the two in a very different way. We see the guys at Vervon, the Vervon team's been really helpful to help us like already like split, like our PMAX campaigns and so on. But I think for us is really trying to get more people into the funnel for like nutrition at the top of the funnel, and really go after more customers, because we always say nutrition is basically good for retention, but the question is it really, when nowadays there is so much competitors like the likes of My Protein, bulk powders, which are almost impossible to beat on price. So it's like, what do you actually do to acquire new customers when these guys are dominating the market, at least in the UK, on those price points? So it's definitely a moving feast for us. But in a way, we've been lucky with the sportswear that it's worked quite well, so that we potentially have now more of a process that we can then focus and have a bit of a shift of focus into nutrition. But behind that, again, there's always the same core basics around your stock availability, making sure that your bestsellers are in stock, freshening up your product offering, and so on. And I think this is something that also needs to be taken into account to make sure that what we do in performance marketing like kind of works. But it's also like building up the understanding that performance marketing is not like the solution to all the problems. It's not by investing more that we'll make more sales. We also need to, again, like go back to those core basics and let performance marketing amplify the message rather than be the solution to poorer sales.
So at Vavon, we see wider profitability metrics, and even going as far as potentially using like P&L reporting and having visibility on that to influence our performance marketing campaigns is going to be really crucial for client success over the next few years or so. What's your view on that? And have you started to consider that yourselves, and like how you can improve those information flows to enable like better performance in your paid campaigns?
Yeah, we've definitely adopted that approach. I think from a P&L perspective, managing cost of goods sold, return rates, integrating all of that into one place, whilst also seeing your paid ad spend as an actual sort of a C2 almost. Implementing that within that P&L structure, and working closely again with finance, because they understand it probably better than we do, and we can both combine and get to a place where we can drive the business forward profitably. So I think we've definitely adopted to it more recently. So it's a process that we're going on, and with Vavon as well, we've definitely worked on that approach, and it's been something that's been a breath of fresh air, to be honest, to be able to look at profitability from a paid ads perspective as a whole business, instead of it just being return on investment, like we spoke about. Paid searches driving a 5. What's the site doing? Probably nothing. So it's how we're aligning on that, and that's been great.
Nice.
Yeah, I think it's a similar situation. Like I was mentioning at the start, we work into a ROI number, which is the mathematical opposite of your cost of sale, which in a way for us is based off the P&L initially. So in our P&L, we'll have different levels of, like your gross margin, your operating margin, and so on. And obviously marketing comes after operating margin. So by default, maintaining this ROI, or this cost of sale, is taken into account all the other costs before that, which obviously make sure that in using like Dan's word, in a way, that we have those guardrails. But I think then this is where it becomes a bit more of a challenge, because the P&L is done, let's say, by finance, and it's what type of P&L are you after, in a way. Like, the finance team will have to reconciliate, and they'll take obviously a little bit more time to give you an accurate view. And I think it's trying to communicate what is actually good enough for paid, and to a point that maybe are we able to have a live view of our P&L, that we can be reactive to it. This would be like quite like game changing for us in general, to be okay. Like, we can be, from a week to week basis, a lot more reactive, because we've launched a product, let's say, and you see the product, for some reason, the sizing doesn't work so well, or something like this. So you can be quite reactive to it. And again, as well, so when we talk about reaction, is it the right reaction? Make sure that it's not a knee-jerk reaction, and that if we have a higher returns rate for a certain week or for a certain month, that we don't just slash the budgets to make up for it, but that we try and fix. Can we take it from a cash perspective, and that we fix the problem at the root, rather than try and save the walls in a way, and then hammer the performance of the business.
Cool. And maybe just like finally touching on that point around returns, and obviously that fluctuation in performance, and like how previously ROAS would never have given us any inkling of that return rate, and we could not optimize towards it. How are you going about navigating that? And like, what initiatives can you like put in place to sort of improve things over time?
I think it's down to Anthony's point on the category level side of stuff that you spoke about. Breaking it down by the categories, the return rate by categories, working with Yvonne on those particular categories, knowing in the PMAX structure that you're almost got, let's say you've got your 5 focuses for the month. I've got t-shirts, jeans, knitwear, denim, all in there. And I know that the return rate's 20% on one, but 40% on the other.
Yeah.
And aligning to that investment into those, managing that return on investment, knowing that actually I'm going to probably get quite a lot of them jeans back in the end. So weighing up the cost in pushing those different categories to the return, I think, is something that we've definitely been looking a lot deeper into. Returns rates in general, I think, like you mentioned, they weren't thought about enough. It was all gross revenue. Even excluding VAT, if you wanted to, you could add in another layer. So yeah, it's definitely a big part of all of that, because they change seasonally depending on whether you've gone into a seasonal sale, whether it's Black Friday, whether you've extended your returns period, whether you've put a charge on returns now, whether you've given free delivery and returns. It's all of that comes into play as well. So managing all of those different moving variables, as well as return rate within your ad spend and the return on investment, I think, is a game changer.
Nice.
Yeah. Again, I think Dan pretty much said it all. That's the return is such a difficult pain point for a business, because there's so many factors that then is like, the real question is, does it make sense for the business to then cut down, let's say, one area of its marketing just because the returns rate are too high? And is it just a spike, or is it actually a trend that we've seen over time? And we actually now see that we have a problem with those products. But then if those products that are causing you a higher return, if they make, let's say, 35% of your sale mix, do you really want to stop spending on those products? Because you still need to gain those market shares. And if you might not have the best customer experience for maybe like 15-20% of those customers, but can you take that loss from a CRV perspective versus your CAC, and then still be able to like scale your business? And then at the same time, this is where the beauty, I guess, of e-commerce and so on is that you can use the website, to use your CRM and so on to make sure that people understand better how to choose the products and maybe make actually the returns process, as bad as it is, a positive experience. So in the customer journey, to try and alleviate the pressure it has on your P&L.
Cool. So just to like finish, I'm going to ask both these guys a question. From your perspective for both brands, what do you see as being the biggest challenge when it comes to profitability across the paid media space over the next few years?
I can start if you want. I think from our end, the main issue I think will always be like what I touched upon, the brand versus the paid. And actually that, to echo like Dan's point around those guardrails, when you've reached that plateau of your cost of sale, you maximize this, and like sure there'll always be these options to make spend more efficient and so on, but at some point, it's like you'll chase the 1% and how much actually will it help the growth of the business. So for us, we'll really be pushing that organic side to allow the paid to actually grow in terms of spend and retain its efficiency, especially just because of the model we work off as a business of having quite a fair bit of discounts and so on. So we lose some of that margin, and it's almost some of the marketing spend is invested into the margin loss at discount by pushing that conversion. So it's really, how do we really maximize this organic growth and go on a upward trend when it comes to that?
Amazing.
Yeah, I think for us, the profitability piece will come into around the markets and the products that work within the right markets, utilizing that cost of sale approach and the max CAC to really scale efficiently within each market. I think that's where for us we're going to see the biggest challenges from a profitability perspective, because rising costs within each market fluctuate and vary, especially when you're trying to scale in the US. It's really difficult. So making sure we've got the parameters in place to scale efficiently is going to be a challenge, but I think it's going to be a good challenge.
Well, thanks for joining us today, guys, and thank you for watching. If you want to hear more about Vivant, then head to vivant.com.